Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast, where it's all about turning your job search into a slam dunk. Your host is Angela Copeland.
Welcome to the Copeland Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Copeland. The format of the program will be a little different today as I'm visiting Dublin, Ireland. With me from the Brooks Hotel in Dublin, I have Karen Willis. Karen is a career coach here in Dublin. Her wealth of experience in healthcare management has empowered her to discover what's important in her own career, and she's now working as a career coach, specializing in empowering women to discover their new career plans or to change careers. Using the strengths and skills she has gained, Karen can relate to her clients having been in their shoes. She understands the struggle they face as they juggle career with other life commitments and a desire to feel effective and valued. Karen, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me, Angela.
Well, first I want to talk just a little bit about the power of social media. We actually connected over Twitter a couple of months ago.
That's right.
And here we are in person.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
So do you use Twitter quite a bit, I think, to promote your business?
Yes, I use Twitter, I use LinkedIn, and I use Facebook.
Oh, that's great.
And each of those have, I suppose, different roles in social media. I would say that LinkedIn is very much about promoting yourself as an employee. Mm-hmm. It's almost like a kind of a curriculum vitae online.
Right.
So anybody who's job hunting, it's really important for them to have a profile on LinkedIn because it is an opportunity for them to showcase their experience, to showcase their qualifications, and to showcase what they're about and how they can be an employable candidate. Mm-hmm. Facebook, I find, is really good for connecting people in groups. So it's about sharing support, sharing opportunities, sharing experience. And I think Twitter is about connecting with all sorts of different people. I mean, you and I have connected on Twitter.
Right.
So Twitter actually makes it really easy to connect with experts in the field. So it's really important if you are job hunting and wanting to change career, it's really important to be on all three because each of those social media has a different role in your job search and in how it can support you.
Oh, that's great. So you must really encourage your clients to use social media then.
Absolutely. Yes, more and more so. I mean, we live in an age now where it's kind of instant download, instant this, instant that. So it's really important that candidates and clients are there online to be seen and to be supported in their job search.
Absolutely. And if someone wanted to follow you on Twitter, what's your Twitter handle?
My Twitter handle is @CoachGoddessIE.
That's great. Yeah. So I know that you had a really long career in healthcare before you decided to go into career coaching. Mm-hmm. What is it that kind of inspired you to make such a big transition?
Well, I suppose I've always had the desire to help people and to work with people. So that led me into healthcare to begin with. I was 7 years in healthcare management in a private hospital. So I dealt a lot with patients and I was able to help them through their journey as they were kind of having surgery or having, critical illness investigated and that. So I helped them and I looked after them and I really enjoyed that role. After 7 years, I wanted a new challenge. So I went into healthcare regulation where I was involved in accrediting medical programs here in Ireland so that they meet the international best practice standards. Uh-huh. So we use the World Federation for Medical Education Standards to assess medical programs here in Ireland and medical programs overseas that award an Irish degree, so it would be programs in Malaysia, for example. So for me, it has always been about working with people and helping people reach their potential and reach the best person that they can be, whether it was healthcare or education and training.
Right.
But my desire then to help people, I felt like I wanted more of a one-to-one connection with people. Mm-hmm. So when I began to think about changing career and doing something different and following that need and that value a little bit more, I looked into changing career and doing something either in counselling or coaching.
Interesting.
And I looked at both, and I just fell in love with the philosophy of coaching, because coaching, as you would know, very much believes that the client themselves has the answers within, and that with a
Right.
little bit of encouragement they can explore their options and explore their values and explore what it is that the inner voice is really saying to them, and it's very much about supporting them in that space. So I love the positivity of coaching, and I love the fact that clients have an aha moment during the coaching process and realize what it is that they've always wanted to do. So I love that philosophy, and I just love being shoulder to shoulder with a client in the coaching process and just rooting for them and being with them every step of the way as they're on their journey. I kind of support them from behind the scenes, and I love the philosophy of coaching.
Oh, that's great. And you do both life coaching and career coaching.
Yes, I do both, but my focus is really career coaching.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you find that those two are related? That people who are struggling in one area may sometimes be struggling in both?
For sure, particularly when somebody is unhappy in their job, it's very difficult to switch it off at 5 o'clock. It very often ends up coming home with you into your family life. You become, you're more tired, you're more overwhelmed, you can be a bit grumpy in the evening and that kind of thing. So it really does impact, if you're not happy in your job, it really does impact on you in your personal time and in your family life. And coaching has a kind of a ripple effect very often.
Right.
When you're looking at career coaching, it very often has a kind of a ripple effect outside of your professional life into your personal life and those around you.
Yeah, I've noticed that with a lot of my clients as well.
Yeah.
They're often just unhappy in general when they're unhappy
Yeah.
at work.
Yeah.
And
We spend too much of our time in a working environment, and if you're not happy, it can have huge ramifications on your private life, and that's in your own sense of morale and sense of self-esteem. So that's where life coaching can actually kick in and help with that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I know that you work mainly with women, I believe, and you work both with people who are looking for a full-time job as well as those who are thinking of starting their own business or who are trying to start their own business. How do you sort of, if you have a client that can't decide which way to go, how do you help to guide them, whether it's to take the full-time job or to start the business?
Okay. Well, interesting you should say that, because I have a lot of clients who, when they come to me, they're very much at a crossroads. They don't know which way to go next. What they do know is that they've got experience and they've got expertise, and they want to use that experience and expertise as best that they can. So my program brings them right back to the very beginning and gets them to look at their values and their motivators and their skills and their unique talents, because sometimes when you're unhappy in a job, it's very often because you're not appreciated, you're not being challenged, and you kind of forget what it is that you're good at, and you forget what it is that led you to do that job to begin with. So it's very much about stepping back from that, going back to the basics, figuring out what it is that you're good at and where you can best put that to use. So my program is very much about exploring those as a first option, and then it becomes clearer to a client whether it is that they want to go further in a different company, in a different role, or whether they want to set up their own business. I mean, I think you would be aware that in Ireland, the economy took a bit of a hit there a couple of years ago, and a lot of clients actually ended up setting up their own businesses because they had the opportunity to do so, because they'd found themselves either taking redundancy packages or being made redundant. And so they found themselves what we might not call natural entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs because of circumstance. And they've found themselves setting up their own businesses because they've realised they have skills to use, skills and expertise that they can put to use. So sometimes they end up setting up their own business.
That's so interesting. And so a redundancy package, just for the listeners in the U.S., it's similar to maybe being laid off, maybe taking a buyout package?
Exactly,
that same
yeah.
kind of a
Yeah.
thing? Okay.
Yeah, that's what we call it here. Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Do you find ever that some of the skills that you end up highlighting with someone, the things that they're really good at, are sometimes things that they do as a hobby or things that they do on the side?
Yes, very much so, very much so. And that's what I love about coaching, because it helps a client understand that sometimes their passion is really, really, really what they end up doing as a career because it's what they end up feeling most fulfilled doing. So, for example, you can have somebody who used to do art as a sideline on a Monday night, for example, can end up turning professional as an artist. And it's just fantastic to see that opportunity and to see somebody growing, because when somebody's doing a job they love, it doesn't feel like a job. It's a passion.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
I've seen that too with clients who they were doing something as a hobby, like you said, and they didn't even think to put it on their resume because it was so far from their mind.
Yeah.
But when they sort of honed in on that, it was something they really loved and that they could do for money at work, instead. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, and people feel really fulfilled when they find that kind of career. They can feel really fulfilled.
Right. And it's different. I think sometimes we're so used to being unhappy at work that it doesn't even occur to us that we might be able to enjoy it.
Yeah, for sure. But sometimes it's our hobbies that keep us sane. If you're in a job that you're not happy with, it's actually your hobby that can keep you sane. And when people realize that can be turned into a career, it's just fantastic.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, so one of the struggles I'm sure that you find with a lot of the women that you coach is they have trouble with work-life balance, really being able to kind of find that balance. And, what are your suggestions for someone who's struggling in that area?
Okay, well, that's always a tricky question. I find that my clients struggle most with time. So I would say to my clients, step back. Women in particular are really, really aspiring to being all things to all people. And sometimes they lose sight of themselves in that. So I would say if there was a buzzword that I could recommend for people to take on board, it would be monotasking and focus. And do one thing at a time. Don't be all things to all people. Take your time, do one thing at a time, focus on it, fulfill yourself, do it properly when you're doing a particular task, and just be mindful of what you're doing right now. And particularly when you're spending time with family, a lot of women bring work home with them because they feel they have to do something, or they're checking emails and all of that kind of thing. And I would say just be mindful of the time that you're spending on work stuff outside of work, because it can really impact negatively on your own time with yourself or with your family. It can really have a bad effect. So I would say focus, don't be all things to all people, and monotask instead of multitasking. That would be my advice.
No, that's great advice. I actually saw a quote this week, and I wish I could remember the exact quote, but what it really meant was that people who are truly very successful, whether it's at work or in their personal life, are the people who say no the most.
Yes, yeah. I saw a quote on the internet the other day, and it said something like, no is a complete sentence. Because women in particular feel like they have to justify the no, and they feel like they have to explain the no, whereas you don't.
Right. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I know in your practice, you use a program that you actually call the Career Flow System with your clients. I'd love to learn a little bit more about it. I saw it on your website. Can you tell me about this system?
Okay, sure. Thank you for asking. I designed the Career Flow System based on my experience of the coaching process. And it is designed to support clients and to help them build a bridge from where they are now to where they want to get to. So we begin with the clarity piece. It's split into 3. So it's clarity, confidence, and change.
Oh, this explains the images that you have on your website.
Yeah, exactly. So we start with clarity, and clarity for my clients is about stepping back, discovering what their skills are, discovering what their transferable skills are, what their values are, what their motivators are, and what their unique talents are, and just recognizing them and acknowledging them, because so often clients lose sight of what it is that they're good at, particularly when they're in jobs that they've been in for a while. They might have gone stale, they might not feel very challenged, and sometimes they just take their own skills for granted, which is awful. So my program begins with the clarity piece, and at the very, very beginning, a client is very often at a crossroads. But gaining clarity on where they are now, what it is that's working for them and why it's working for them, and ditching what's not working and establishing boundaries on what's not working, and establishing what you're tolerating and cutting out what it is that is causing you particular distress or particular pain. That's all included in the clarity piece. After that, clients, I find, need a little kind of to build their confidence, because very often in jobs where they're unhappy, they need to build their confidence again. They need to build their own sense of self-esteem and their own sense of self-worth. And that is easier to do once you've established what your skills are. And we put the skills and then the self-confidence into a kind of a toolbox, and the client can bring those with them to whatever job they decide to do, whether it's to go for a promotion or whether it's to go and do something completely different and set up their own business, for example. And after that, then the change piece, we work on designing the plan, setting the goals, developing the strategy, whatever word the client is most comfortable with. Some people find the word change really, really scary. So how I frame it is that when you look back over your life, from the time you were a child, there's been constant change throughout your life. When you go to junior school for the first time, when you change to senior school, when you go to college, chances are clients have moved house at least once in their life. So there's always been change. But when you look at it in the future, you can build up a fear of change, and it's a fear of the unknown mostly. When you look back at changes that you've undergone, very often it's been the best thing that's ever happened to you. Even if it's a bit scary at the time, it brings out skills and it brings out your resources and your resilience that you never even knew you had. So my program really looks at change and developing a plan. My program looks at building the bridge from where they are now to where they want to be. I'm with them every step of the way. They take it one step at a time. They're able to break it down into achievable goals, step by step. And my program is not about bringing them to the edge of the cliff and pushing them off. It's literally about bringing them step by step over the bridge so they can see the other side, and they just break it down to get there.
Oh, that's great. It sounds like you're able to really help them handle that fear.
Yes.
As they go along in small pieces.
Yeah, it's very important, because it's very easy to get overwhelmed, particularly if you're changing career and doing something completely different or setting up your own business. It's very easy to become overwhelmed, and that overwhelm can lead to paralysis, because particularly for women, they try and get so many things so right that it's really important to make sure that if you break it down into one step at a time, you can deal with the fear and you avoid the paralysis, because there's nothing worse than becoming paralyzed by your own fear.
Absolutely. And I think
and it's easy to do.
You said at the beginning too that people, it's like their self-esteem comes down.
Yeah.
Because when you are in a job that you are not happy with, sometimes maybe your manager is kind of negative towards you, or you don't feel good at your job, or you haven't been challenged in a long time. And you have to really revisit those really positive aspects of who you are.
Absolutely. And that's the real benefit of coaching, because it looks at the positives, but it also looks at what you're tolerating and the personal cost to you of that toleration. Right. I mean, I'm sure some of your listeners might have read Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, and there's another book called The Confidence Code by Katty Kay and Claire Shipman, and they are exploring that whole area as well, and they're really, really good books to read, because a lot of women can really identify with that story and really identify with the journey that those women have taken and how it can benefit them. So they're really good books to read as part of a change process that gives them the knowledge that they're not alone, that women are not alone, and that other women have experienced what they've experienced, and that you can get through it and make a new life for yourself.
No, that's fantastic. And I think another thing that's really nice with coaching is that you're sort of like this outside perspective. So you're not there with them at work every day being stressed.
Yes.
You're able to have a fresh set of eyes.
Yes.
And when they're feeling down, you can, encourage them and be with them.
Very much so. Very much so, yeah.
I think that's great. So on a different topic, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Dublin.
Oh, yeah.
I was visiting last year, and I was so impressed with all of the companies who've moved here. I think some of our listeners may or may not be aware, but especially a lot of U.S. companies have moved offices here. Their European headquarters are here. Google has an office here, LinkedIn, Facebook, I believe Amazon, and
eBay, PayPal.
The list is
huge. It's really incredible what's happening. And I'd love to get sort of your perspective on sort of this change that's happened over the last few years.
Okay, well, that's a really good question. As you know, Ireland, and I'm sure some of your listeners would know as well, Ireland did suffer in a downturn in the economy recently. I think it probably began happening around 2007, 2008. It got particularly bad. And a lot of people who were highly qualified and highly experienced ended up losing their jobs and being laid off. And so there was a wealth of talent in Ireland. And I think a lot of those companies like Google and eBay and LinkedIn recognised that there was a pool of untapped talent here in Ireland, ready and eager to get back into the workforce. Coupled with the fact that a lot of the construction industry in particular crashed, and a lot of office space, which had been primed for use in 2007, 2008, ended up being left idle. So ground rents dropped during the years kind of 2008, 2009.
Right.
And this really encouraged new companies to come in and set up. A lot of them have their headquarters here now. So it encouraged them to set up. So there was the pool of the employees in the economy ready and willing to get back, highly experienced, highly qualified. Plus the ground rents dropped. So it was an opportunity to get a large office space and have a really, really nice office space for their employees, coupled with the fact, obviously, that we speak English here. So it was a really good way for American companies to get into Europe, because we're only an hour's flight from Paris and Germany and places like that. So it's a really, really good entry point into Europe for all of these companies. So, of course, a lot of these companies use would need people who would have other languages as well. So it's easy for them to recruit in Ireland from Spain and from France and from Germany and other countries. So the experience is not just in Ireland but in Europe in general. And these companies recognise that opportunity and developed it. And these companies are really, really sought after companies now by employees in Ireland, because they're very well recognised for looking after their staff and developing their staff and creating a sense of well-being and investing in their staff. So whereas before companies like the banks might have been the plum job to get because of the security and the pensionable and the flexible hours and that, now it's the Googles and the Facebooks and the LinkedIn and eBay, all of those companies that look after their staff and who recognise the pool of really highly qualified people here in Ireland.
Oh, that's just incredible.
Yeah.
So do people in Ireland look at this change as a positive thing, or do they?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. I think I read a report actually the other day by Hayes Recruitment, which said that 3 out of 5 people want to move jobs next year.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Next year is going to be a real buzz year, and I think there's going to be a lot of movement in the economy, and those kind of companies are going to play a key role in that kind of recruitment and that culture that's in Ireland at the moment. People feel really ready now to take a kind of a gamble and to start moving, because up until now, a lot of people who still were lucky enough to have jobs during the downturn were maybe doing jobs that actually didn't altogether suit them, but they were paying the rent and paying the mortgage with those jobs. Now people are a little bit more prepared to take another step, take it to the next level. Particularly in the public service, actually, we've had a lot of levies introduced, embargoes on recruitment, so there was no opportunity to move up, there was no opportunity to cross-train, and anybody who left the public sector wasn't replaced, and a lot of people were working longer hours for less money. Those kind of people are really getting ready to kind of take the next step, do something different, and take a bit more of a chance, a bit more of a gamble. There's definitely a buzz. You can almost feel it in the air. I was watching the news yesterday evening, and it turns out that every shop front on Grafton Street, which is our main shopping street, has now been taken.
I saw
and
that
occupied.
too.
Yeah. Whereas about 4 years ago, you'd be walking down the street and there'd be a lot of empty shop fronts, and it was really demoralising for people. And really, I mean, the effect that has on the economy. So it's really picking up and people can feel it and they're ready for change and ready to exploit the opportunities that are there. It's becoming much more now of an employer's market, whereas it was an it's becoming more of an employee's market, whereas it was an employer's market for the last 4 years.
I've noticed a similar trend with some of my clients who were stuck in a job for a long time because they felt like they didn't have a lot of choices. The economy wasn't going well. And as they've started to see the economy beginning to go up in the U.S., they've started to look more because they feel like it's time. I've been waiting a long time and now I can. The other thing, though, I really liked when I visited Ireland last year, I traveled all over Europe.
Right.
And I felt that Dublin was by far the most inexpensive city that I visited. It was, of all the places I went, maybe it was where I went.
Maybe it was where you went.
But, I went, the past couple of years I've been to like Sweden and Norway. And, especially Norway is very expensive. And I just felt like, wow, I could really do things here and it wasn't cost prohibitive. So I could see how, just in general, there's so many positive factors that would bring companies here. And speaking of those companies, when I've looked online, it seems that many of the roles that companies like Google or Facebook are offering, many of them are sales roles. And I've noticed many do require specific language skills, depending on which country you're going to be supporting from here. So that's interesting. I mean, do you see a lot of people coming from other countries in Europe?
Absolutely. As you know, we're part of the EU, and there is a freedom of movement legislation in the EU, which means that Irish companies or US companies working in Ireland, based in Ireland, have to prioritise either Irish citizens or European citizens when it comes to filling a role. So there's a wealth of experience and foreign language skills easily at their fingertips here in Ireland, because it's very easy. There's no visa requirements for a lot of EU countries for their citizens to come into Ireland and work. So it's been really positive for those companies who have customer service roles in particular with those countries.
It's so interesting. When I was here last year, I actually took a salsa dancing class.
Oh, wow.
Because I like to do things like that because you get to meet people who are local. And, when you take one of these dance classes, they rotate you around in a circle. And so you get to talk to many different people. And I was so surprised. Almost every single person that I danced with was from a different country. And they had all moved here for different roles. And I just found it to be so interesting that at just this point in time, you have people coming from all over to this one place. It's just incredible. And speaking of moving to Dublin or to Europe for work, I do have a lot of clients who approach me in the US who are really interested to move to Europe for work. And I mentioned to you before we started, I really struggle, with giving them advice because it seems like a real challenge. I'd love to sort of get your inside perspective because I feel like being here, you have a lot more knowledge about what the requirements are and why it may or may not be more difficult.
Okay. Well, as I mentioned just now, Ireland is part of the EU, and so any legislation passed within the EU with regard to employment law applies to us. So the employment law that would be particularly relevant to your clients would be the EU 2013-55 EU directive, which talks about freedom of movement within the EU. And this basically means that anybody applying to work in Ireland, whether they're Irish or European, gets priority, unfortunately, over citizens from another country, from outside of the EU. Now, however, there are exceptions, and your clients might be interested to hear this. Information can be found on the inis.gov.ie website, and from there it leads you to the Department of Jobs, Enterprise and Innovation website. And on there, your clients will find a list of jobs and careers that are either eligible for a visa to work in Ireland or ineligible for a visa to work in Ireland. The jobs that are eligible are very generally highly skilled, specific skills jobs. So it would be like medicine, engineering, I know that's your background, and those kind of very highly skilled jobs. They would be eligible to apply for a visa to work in Ireland. However, the ineligible list is usually a little bit longer, and it was updated actually in November 2014, so just last month they added some more onto it. But that looks at what they call broad employment categories, and it will be standard. They use a standard occupational classification system. So basically it means that if it's a broad employment role that you're applying for, you wouldn't necessarily be eligible to apply for a visa, simply because there's already a pool of people in Ireland and in Europe who are qualified to do that particular role. So that's where you would get the best information, inis.gov.ie, and the Department of Jobs, Enterprise and Innovation, which is djei.ie. But I can send you those links, and if they're any help to your clients, that would be super.
That'd be great. I can put them in the show notes for the podcast as well. That'd be fantastic. I think the thing that this really compares with is we have very similar laws in the U.S. in terms of employment and visas. And, depending on which country you come from to the U.S., it's more or less difficult. We sort of have certain allocations. But the jobs which are the easiest to obtain if you're from another country are also highly skilled. They are also engineering jobs, medical jobs. It is very difficult to, say, get a marketing job, for example, if you come from another country, just straight away. And it's not that there are not options, but it's certainly more tricky. We were talking a little before, in the U.S., you actually have to be sponsored by a company to get your work visa, and actually you're not allowed to quit that company
for a certain amount of time.
Right, like once you get your green card, you can, but you can switch jobs, but you can't be without a job. So, but when you apply in Europe, is it different?
Well, there are different visa categories to get into Ireland, and again, all of that information will be on inis.gov.ie. They deal with applications kind of on a first come, first served basis, and they look at all aspects of your application. So there are quite a few requirements that a candidate would be required to have in order to work in Ireland. So all of the information is on inis.gov.ie.
So would someone go there first and apply there before they would apply for the job, or is it the other way?
That's a good question, actually. I think it depends on the kind of role that they're going for. But I would say my advice would be to start it with a website first and see what information they can get from there before taking the next step. That would be my best advice.
Okay, that makes sense. I know I mentioned to you, I just get a lot of people who come and, they're really interested to come here, but I totally understand, the thought process behind why it's more difficult.
And it actually even applies to American citizens who study in Ireland, or anybody from outside of the EU who studies in Ireland, because even when you study in Ireland, you're not guaranteed to get a job in Ireland afterwards. It still goes by the nationality of the candidate.
Right.
So, for example, one particularly controversial result of this legislation is that medical students who come from outside of Ireland or the EU, so maybe from Malaysia or from the States, would spend 5 years, 6 years studying in Ireland. They would do their internship. They would try to do their internship in Ireland, but they might not get a job doing the internship because those jobs would be, there's a limited number of internship places, and those jobs will be allocated to either Irish or EU citizens first, and only then, if there's an overspill of jobs, would candidates from outside of the Ireland and the EU be eligible to apply. So it even applies if you've studied in Ireland.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that's good advice. I actually have a client recently who I suggested he might want to consider graduate school in Europe.
Okay, yeah.
Because it would be an opportunity, to live here and possibly to continue to work here afterwards.
Yeah. I mean, graduates can be lucky and can get jobs, but generally it's only if the jobs have not been filled by Irish and EU candidates.
That makes total sense. That makes sense. Well, This has been very helpful. Is there any other advice that you'd like to share with our listeners today? I feel like we've really quickly covered a lot of ground.
Well, I would say, I suppose what I always say to my clients is the George Eliot quote, it's never too late to be what you might have been. And I really believe that, because I think so many people have been in jobs and have gotten huge experience and now want to use that experience to best suit them and to follow their dreams, and not just work to pay the mortgage or pay the rent, but to work because they want to be fulfilled. There's been a real shift in values in Ireland, I think, and people are more inclined to follow jobs where they're fulfilling their dreams and fulfilling their passions. So there's a real buzz about the economy now, and I would say it's never too late to be what you might have been.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's such a good quote.
Yeah.
That's such a good quote. Well, so if listeners would like to contact you, you have a website.
I do indeed.
And it's KarenWillisCoaching.ie.
Yeah.
Right?
That's it.
And you mentioned earlier you're also on Twitter.
Yeah.
At Coach Goddess IE
Yeah.
as well. Are those the best ways to reach out to you?
Absolutely. In fact, on my website, KarenWillisCoaching.ie, I'm going to be launching a brand new report this week called Career Breakthrough, the 5 essentials to supercharge your next career move. So some of your clients might enjoy reading that if it's any help to them.
Absolutely.
So yes, they can contact me through that, and I would be delighted to send you a PDF of that
Oh,
report if you
fantastic.
would like to send that on to your clients
Yeah,
as well.
thank you so much.
And if any of your clients want to contact me, I'll be more than happy to offer them a complimentary clarity consultation.
Oh, thank you. And I was going to actually ask you, you mentioned that you have worked with one or so clients internationally before. Is that something that you're open to if people are interested to contact you?
Okay. I mean, coaching can very much be done over Skype or FaceTime or anything like that. So I'm very much open to, if there's anybody that I can be, any of your clients that I can be of any assistance to, I'd be more than happy to have a chat with them.
Oh, that's great. I'm sure there's probably people listening who are interested to relocate.
Yes.
That might want to
Yeah.
reach out to someone who's local.
Well, if I can be of any assistance, I'd be delighted.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you very much.
Well, the discussion today has been very helpful. Thank you to everyone for listening. Tune in next week for another edition of the Copeland Coaching Podcast. And if you've enjoyed the program today, be sure to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher to make sure you never miss an episode.
Thank you for listening to the Copeland Coaching Podcast today with your host, Angela Copeland. Tune in next time to get more great tips on turning your job search into a slam dunk.